It's not looking too good for men. Why are men lonelier, weaker, poorer, and less educated than they were 50 years ago? Why don't women want to date them as much as they did 50 years ago? Are men today better than previous generations of men? The data says no. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the decline of men, the divide between previous generations of men and now, why help isn't helping, 2 answers as to why men are failing, and where men can go from here. I can assure you that whatever you think you know about the state of men in 2025, it's worse. All right, let's go back in time. In 1972, the year Title IX passed, the gender gap in college degree attainment was 13% and in favor of men. Today, that same gap has increased to 15%, but in favor of women. See, the gender gap hasn't disappeared. In fact, it's more pronounced than ever. It's just flipped. And it doesn't even start in college. Today, 2/3 of high school students in the top 10% of their GPA classes are female, while 2/3 of the bottom 10% are male. After high school, roughly 70% of women go on to college, compared to just 40% of men. This pattern isn't unique to the US either. Countries as diverse as Iran, Kazakhstan, Finland, Philippines, and Israel are seeing similar trends. In every country in the OECD, there are now more young women than young men with a bachelor's degree, and it doesn't stop at schooling. Richard Reeves of the Brookings Institute said that the overall picture is that at almost every age, in almost every advanced economy in the world, the girls are leaving the boys and the women leaving the men way behind. For example, in 22 of the largest cities in the US, including Miami, New York, DC, Los Angeles, and San Diego, women between the ages of 16 and 29 are earning more than their male counterparts for the same age and job. Now, let's be clear from the get-go, the solution is not to slow women down. This isn't a zero-sum game where only men or women can succeed. In the same way that life expectancy has increased in both men and women, so too can prosperity and success. The incredible progress that women have made is a testament to the lengths we've gone to ensure equality, and to suggest in any way that women are somehow impeding men just simply isn't backed by any real empirical evidence. No, what concerns me has nothing to do with how the men are faring against their female counterparts and everything to do with how they're faring against previous generations of men. Mentally, we've already seen that men have become the educational laggards. Physically, in 1970, 15% of men were classified as obese. Today, it's 40%. Grip strength, which is a widely accepted proxy for overall muscular strength, has declined rapidly. In 1985, men had an average grip strength of 117 pounds, but by 2016, it was just 98 pounds. The average man today is heavier, slower, and more inflamed than his grandfather was, and he's more likely to die from a preventable disease because of it. Emotionally, men are feeling more isolated than ever. Pew Research notes that in 2012, 16% of men aged 18 to 29 reported feeling lonely often or always. Today, it is almost doubled to 28%. Spiritually, or talking from a sense of purpose, men are taking their lives at increasing rates. Since the year 2000, these rates have increased almost 50%. If those rates had remained the same as 2000, then approximately 400,000 more men would be alive in the US today. That is more than the number of men lost in World War II. These 4 challenges of men are what I call the inner war. They make up the 4 internal challenges of men. But there are external challenges too, of course. Financially, men are actually earning less than they were in the 70s when taking inflation into account. The median wage of the American male has declined by almost $13,000 after accounting for inflation in the 4 decades since 1969. That is a 28% reduction in the annual earning power of men. Socially, in what experts are now calling the friendship recession, 15% of men say they have no close friends, up from 3% in 1990. The number of men with 10 or more close friends has collapsed from 40% to 15%. In that same year, 45% of young men reported that when facing a personal problem, they would reach out to their friends. Today, that number is 22%. So who are they reaching out to? 36% say their first call would be to their parents. Why is that? Because as of 2014, 35% of young adult men are living with their parents. That's more than the number of men who were living with a wife or partner. Professionally, these men aren't even motivated to work. In 1970, 98% of high school educated young men were in the labor force, meaning they had a job or were looking for one. Today, it's 87%. Among college graduates, labor force participation fell from 96 to 89% over that same time period. Relationally, 1 in 3 men haven't had sex in the last 12 months. In 2008, around 10% of men under 30 reported no sex in the past year. By 2021, that number had tripled to 31%. And it's certainly not because men want celibacy. These 4 external challenges of men are what I call the external gauntlet. Every man experiences the challenges of the inner war and the external gauntlet, but what is becoming more and more apparent is that they feel less prepared to do so. How is it that as the world makes leaps in technology, as humans know more today than we ever have in human history, that men are on the decline in almost every measurable factor. Well, the good news is that not all of them are. The top 10% of men have never had it better. In 1970, executive pay was 20 times the average worker's salary. Today, it's 351 to 1. If you earned $70,000 back then, your CEO made 1.4 million. Today, that same CEO would be making 24.6 million. In online dating, 20% of men receive 80% of the female swipes, and men are outnumbering women on the apps 9 to 1. The advantage extends to education. In 1973, a college-educated man earned 23% more than his high school-educated peers. By 2014, it was 72% more. Top jobs are also going remote, offering higher pay and more freedom. Unsurprisingly, these top 10% of men are reporting higher happiness. Simply put, the top 10% of men are richer, freer, more educated, and more desired than ever before, while the bottom 90% are poorer, lonelier, more depressed, more sedentary, and less driven than ever before. Now, the simple implication here would be to say that men need more help. But interestingly, and perhaps unsurprisingly, men don't want it. When analyzing the effectiveness of social programs that, for example, get kids into college or get people into the workforce, the results by gender are staggering. One project in Kalamazoo, Michigan, aimed to increase college completion rates by offering free tuition. A cost-benefit analysis showed an overall gain of $69,000 per female participant, which is a 12% ROI. Compare this to the loss of $21,000 per male participant. In other words, it was expensive and it didn't work for men. The program was there, but the men didn't take advantage of it. Another program called Stay the Course in Texas aimed to increase community college completion rate, largely from middle class and lower income families. The program tripled associate degree completion rates amongst women and had no measurable impact on male students. Even in my very own New York City, the Paycheck Plus program provided around 3,000 people with a wage bonus of $2,000. The goal was to lift employment rates. The program found a relatively large positive effect amongst women, but no effect amongst men. In a meta-analysis of these studies, the results showed that in general, social programs don't work, and the ones that do are only working for women. I think what's most interesting about these programs is that when the researchers are asked why there is a discrepancy, they all share a resounding and perhaps terrifying answer: we don't know. What they're saying is that there is not a single large variable discrepancy in the data that could account for such a broad dichotomization of the results. Given what I've learned so far on this topic, I have two theories that come to mind. The first is called the problem of purpose, and the second is the orchid dandelion theory. I mentioned earlier that men are taking their own lives at increasing rates. On the occasions where men fail to do so, the words they use to describe themselves are useless and worthless. It used to be that the role of men were to be protectors, providers, and procreators. But in most developed countries, this definition is fading. Threats in developed economies are falling, so the role of protector is becoming less relevant. Women are now earning just as much, if not more than men, and so the role of provider is being stripped from them also. What's left is procreator, and women certainly no longer need men for that. So where do these men go to find their worth? Researchers at the University of North Carolina found that playing video games has increased staggeringly among men in their 20s, doubling in time commitment between 2005 and 2015. And it's likely to increase again in the 10-year span between 2015 and 2025. The men can't find their roles as protectors, providers, and procreators in the real world, and so go to gaming because the reality there is much more attractive than the reality here. And when you spend so much time developing your avatar in whatever virtual world you find yourself, your incentive to develop your real self dissipates. This is the problem of purpose. The orchid dandelion hypothesis comes out of developmental psychology and refers to boys and girls' ability to thrive in their environment. Dandelions are resilient, able to grow and thrive in almost any environment, whether nurturing or harsh. Give them sunlight or shade, they survive. Orchids are sensitive, more reactive to their environments, both negative and positive. In poor conditions, they will, but in rich, nurturing environments, they blossom into something extraordinary. As it so happens, girls tend to be dandelions and boys tend to be orchids. This is why boys seem to fare particularly poorly in certain cities, including Baltimore, as well as places like Detroit and Fresno. The outcome for girls are less influenced by their zip codes. Girls who are raised in the bottom fifth of socioeconomic status are 57% more likely to get a 4-year college degree than boys from the bottom fifth. But if you look at the top fifth of boys and girls in the same socioeconomic status, the difference shrinks to just 8%. Boys raised by single parents, for example, especially single mothers, tend to struggle more than girls in the same households. They're more likely to act out in school, fall behind academically, and are less likely to attend college. While both boys and girls face challenges, the effects on boys are often sharper, driven largely by higher rates of behavioral issues and a lack of consistent male guidance. Richard Reeves puts it plainly. Looked at from every angle, the pattern is clear. Economic and social disadvantage hurts boys more than girls. The position of men in the world has taken a hit, and it's now more confusing than ever for men to answer questions such as, is it okay to date a girl who earns more than me? Am I allowed to cry in front of people? Should I aim to be feared or liked? Should I prioritize my career over my personal life, or vice versa? Is apologizing an admission of weakness? How do I measure my success as a man? Am I allowed to show anger? The reason my research on masculinity started was because I didn't know the answers to questions like these, but I intend to find them. Some of them might be more binary yes-no solutions, and others less so. Either way, there must be some answers that are closer to the truth than others. So if topics like this interest you, consider liking and subscribing to this channel, where I'll be deep diving into the current affairs and hopefully solutions to the challenges of masculinity.